Thank you all for being here today for our workshop on an introduction to social innovation. My name is Cameron Law, and I serve as the Executive Director here at the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. I'm joined by two of our team members here, Dr. Brian Gladden, who's one of our entrepreneurs in residence, and then Arlene Miranda, who heads up our marketing and operations. If you're just getting familiar with the Carlson Center, we serve as a regional hub and platform for providing approachable and accessible entrepreneurial education, community, and support to enable startup founders of all backgrounds to explore and launch their businesses. And we're on this mission to make innovation and entrepreneurship pervasive throughout the greater Sacramento region, with really this vision of making this region a premier hub of innovation and entrepreneurship. And how we've gone about doing that is we've operationalized what we call the entrepreneurial journey, and we've broken it into three core areas of discover, build, and launch. And we're here to support you along that continuum. Today's workshop is all about one of our discover types of programs, and we want to give you the tools, frameworks, and mindsets to be a successful social and civic innovator. And we're excited for you to hop into this session. But before we get started, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. For starters, we'd love for you to use the chat feature and engage with one another and share what you're working on. So if you want to get started and introduce yourself and just say where you're joining from and what your impact idea is, that would be terrific. And then if you're able to stay on mute the whole time, that would be not the whole time, but while you're basically while Brian's presenting would be terrific, just for recording purposes as well as just for the user experience. Lastly, we will be using the raised hand feature as well as the chat feature to bring in any questions that you might have, and I can periodically stop Brian as we're going forward. But without further ado, I'll turn it over to Brian, who will be leading our session. But we're really excited to have all of you in the space and look forward to the time with all of you.
Welcome, everybody. Great to see lots of faces here. I'm sure we'll have more joining us. So looks like we got people from all over and lots of different types of ideas. So welcome, and we hope you get some value out of this to take your idea to the next level. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get going. It takes just a second, a little slow for Zoom. So if there's any really interesting ones, Cameron, let me know of people who coming in from far away, or it'd be interesting to know where we're getting folks from. All right. Looks like you can see my screen and we're moving. So today we're going to talk about social innovation. Now, really, what does that mean? What are the things you need to think about? How to make an impact, and really kind of getting you tuned up for hopefully some other sessions where you can dig in a little bit deeper to take that idea to the next step and create something and launch something. So my name, Brian Gladden. I'm, as Carlson said, one of the entrepreneurs in residence at the Carlson Center. And I'm a startup coach as well. I help businesses get to, launch and get to product market fit or problem solution fit, whatever the area that they're in, and also help companies and corporations innovate, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit. And I've done a lot of work and a member of lots of nonprofit and social impact organizations. So this is a great passion, trying to give back and do better and make a difference. So what's our goal of the workshop? It really is to provide an innovation mindset, some frameworks and tools that you as civic-minded social innovators can use. These fundamentals hopefully will help you to develop and deploy solutions that will make an impact to social and environmental issues. Maybe it's in the region, maybe your city, maybe the world, and really help provide a benefit to society. We're going to cover what social innovation is, talk about purpose, and then business models, mindsets, and problems we're solving, a little bit about how do we reduce risk with this idea, and then really what's the impact? How are you going to measure this and scale this up? So let's start with defining social innovation. Social innovation is the invention, development, and implementation of new ideas to solve social problems faced by individuals, groups, or communities. And the new ideas is the innovation piece, right? So you could start a nonprofit and just do something that's already going and do the same old thing, that's fine. but innovation really means creating a leap in value for the end user, right? The customer, new ideas. Social impact, another definition here, because what you're going to be doing is making a social impact, is to provide a significant positive change that addresses a pressing social challenge, right? So it's great that you create something innovative, but at the end of the day, we need to make a social impact to have a really big difference. And then you're a social entrepreneur. What does that mean? Well, an approach by individuals, groups, startup companies, or entrepreneurs in which they develop, fund, and implement solutions to social, cultural, and environmental issues. So you're a social entrepreneur trying to create social impact through a social innovation, right? So we've kind of talked about all these terms you might hear. What do they mean? You know, who are you? Where do you fit into this? And at the end of the day, you might have heard this term, triple bottom line. What many of you are going to probably try and create is this triple bottom line idea. What is it? Well, it's really a concept where we believe that firms should commit to measuring their social and environmental impact as well as financial impact. So we all know the bottom line, right? Your profits and losses, and that's great. But nowadays, even for-profit large companies don't just look at the bottom line, they look at the triple bottom line. And that means profit, which is the norm, but also people, society, as well as the planet, the environment. And if all those three things happen, you have sustainability, and you kind of look at this: profit, people, planet, the 3 Ps. So keep those concepts in mind as you move forward. And we'll probably talk about several of these again today. So as a social entrepreneur, you are really digging into this and stepping into this new ecosystem. Maybe you've never done a social innovation or worked in a nonprofit, impact, environmental type of thing. So a social innovation ecosystem is a little bit different than a normal for-profit. You have a lot of different stakeholders that have skin in the game, or that have to be engaged for you to make a difference. And so we want to look at these things. And this, when we do the 4-part series, if you join us, we dig in much deeper. How can you make sure that this new startup idea you have can actually make a difference? And the key is you have to get the entire rest of the ecosystem working with you and behind you, or else you really won't have enough scale to make a big difference. You know, if you're working on homelessness and you launch something and you help 3 people that are homeless, okay, good for you, but that doesn't really provide a social impact. Maybe to those 3 people you help, but that's not something that any of the ecosystem, policyholders, cities, other startups, investors, companies who want to help you, or other social orgs, they're not going to be involved with something that doesn't scale up and really make a dent in society. So think about the ecosystem that you're digging into, what region you're in, the industry, the cause, the need. But one of the things that you as a social entrepreneur are going to face as a challenge is the barriers to social innovation. And this is something that you need to keep in mind. 3 things really: scarce funds. You need to have enough funds to be able to scale an idea up to make enough impact that others care about it. Different than a startup business where you might want to do a food truck and you're just making a living and you're fine with that. That's wonderful. Well, that's a little bit different than social impact, where you have to scale up to actually help the masses. A fragmented ecosystem. This is one of the big things where you might just be working with yourself or one other partner, but you're really not engaged in the rest of the ecosystem we just looked at. That is going to limit your ability to make an impact. And then leadership deficiencies. You know, yourself, your team have the ability to actually do what you want to get done. And what's interesting is this stagnation chasm, we call it. And you might have an idea, so you're over here just trying to figure out what this idea is, create your business model, create a pilot, prototype. But that's where most entrepreneurs then have a hard time jumping this chasm to, I got a model, I got a cool idea, but how do I really scale it up to make a difference in society? And that's what we'll talk about. So what are some areas of focus for you as a social entrepreneur to make an impact? This might be, again, the introduction. You haven't really thought about it. You just thought, sounds great. You love to do good, give back. Well, one of the key groups that you can really go out and do some work and research on is United Nations. And this is their goals. So you can Google their website, and one of the things that will pop up is Sustainable Development Goals. And there's 17 of these goals, and it really breaks down into almost every area you could think of, from poverty, hunger, education, gender equality, energy, water, climate, peace, right? All these different things, sustainable communities. So just about every area of nonprofit social impact that you want to do, you could fit into one of these areas. And so at the United Nations, they have a lot of partners, frameworks, tools, best practices in these areas that can actually help you, give you more information. So it's a really great place to start if you're not really sure and you have several areas of passion and you're like, well, which one do I want to dig into? And this might be a good place to start. So now that you know you're a social entrepreneur, you want to make a social impact, you've got a cool idea potentially in one of these areas, what's next? Well, why do you exist? What is the purpose of this new venture you want to start? And some of you might have heard of Simon Sinek, famous for start with why, kind of your vision, your purpose for existing. That's the same for a business. So if you look at a lot of the biggest businesses out there in the world and Google them, they'll have a vision statement, purpose statement, values. Those are actually really important, especially for a social impact venture, a nonprofit wanting to do good, because people want to know what you stand for. It's great that you help homeless people, but what's the bigger thing you're trying to do? Why do you do that? Why do you exist? And funders, other companies that might like your cause, they want to know why you're doing what you're doing and what you stand for. So that shared purpose can build inclusive cultures in your company as well as your ecosystem. And we always start with that why. What you do is what most of us focus on in a day-to-day life, right? Which is, we sell this widget or we do this thing. How you do it might be indirect or direct or profit, nonprofit, but why you do it, besides making money, that's the key thing that you want to think about. So if we dig into that a little bit deeper, it really comes down to your purpose, why an organization exists beyond making money. And if you, again, Google, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Facebook, right, LinkedIn, all the big companies you think about, Tesla, you'll see purpose statements on their websites, or vision statements, really the same thing. And those help to guide, inspire, and rally both customers and employees to a cause greater than yourselves. So you might have a mission of the next 3 to 5 years to, make X dollars, take 10, be the biggest in this industry or in your city, right? Or some traction. But that's really a short-term, more of a tactical goal. The vision and purpose statement, that could be a 20 to 30-year goal that never changes. If you're somebody like a for-profit like Intel, their purpose is to connect everyone on the planet to the internet. And that's a little bit different than you might think about because they sell microchips, right? Semiconductors. So it's not to be the biggest semiconductor, company. It's to connect people to the internet. So the thing they sell is not their purpose for being in business. It's the outcome. What does it do? Because the form factor could change, right? They could change from, the chip into a laptop or a computer, to cloud technology, whatever it is in the future, cell phones. But the end goal is to connect people to the internet, right? That purpose. And that's what rallies people. It also helps you be innovative, because the thing you're doing now, you're like, well, that's cool, but we have new technology, or we have found new needs, so we can change the thing that we do, the product or service, but we're still after that guiding light, that northern star that says, here's who we are, here's why we exist. So here's some, actually, for you people that want some data and the evidence-based. We talked about the triple bottom line already and the purpose, but these two things are key, especially for the younger generations who are now the main people in the workforce, Gen Zs and millennials. 74% of employees place a high value on finding work that delivers on a sense of purpose. So that's a big deal when 3/4 of your workforce wants to know what you stand for. 83% of Gen Zs in the US consider a company's purpose when deciding where to work. So now more than ever, people have a big choice, right, of where to work, and there's lots of incentives. They're looking at your purpose, whether it's say on your site, whether you talk about your purpose, you actually walk the walk, right? So make sure that you actually, when you're creating this new venture, start with purpose. What is it you're trying to do? Here's a couple of good examples of some nonprofits, some social impact companies and their vision statements. So for Alzheimer's Association, our vision is a world without Alzheimer's. Pretty straightforward. Feeding America is a hunger-free America. For Life is Good, spreading the power of optimism. You can guess this one. Our purpose is to provide emergency shelter to families who have lost their home to disaster, enabling them to rebuild their lives. That's Shelter Box, and we're going to talk more about them. And then a world where everyone has a decent place to live. It's Habitat for Humanity. And so you kind of start with a adjective, right? Provide shelter, spread the power of optimism, hunger-free, and everyone has a decent place to live. So some sort of action word. When you're thinking about your potential idea, maybe you've written it down, maybe it's still in your head. Start with this vision. What is it you're trying to do? So before we get into this, so you've now kind of looked at, I'm a social entrepreneur, have an idea, know I want to make an impact, I got to engage the ecosystem to be able to scale it up and really make a difference. We talked about the purpose and vision statements and who you want to be to create that. So now you've got that on paper and you're ready to go. Okay, what's next? Well, we got to think about this mindset now as an entrepreneur, getting to the market, right? And it doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit, for-profit, what industry you're in. These frameworks and tools now are all the same. How do I get this business to launch and to actually get traction? And it starts with this entrepreneurial mindset. So what do we mean by that? Well, in the old days, I don't know if any of you have written business plans before, but 20 years ago, it was write a 200-page Word document and lots of spreadsheets, and then you take that to a bank or some sort of investor and try and get money. That was your business plan. That does not exist anymore. People do not want to read it. They will not read 200-page business plan. They'll read your summary and they'll flip to the end and they'll read your projections and then they'll say, tell me about it. What they really want is a very simple, succinct business model. And we can do that in one single page of paper that summarizes how you create, deliver, and capture value. That's your business model. So we're going to talk a lot about business models in a second. So you don't have to spend hours and hours writing Word documents. What you really need to do is understand all the components of a business model and how you deliver value to the end user, and especially around the problem. And that's what we're going to talk about. However, there is a mindset problem with many innovators, entrepreneurs. And that is, we call this innovator's bias. We all have maybe this cool idea, maybe again, it's homelessness, and you've got this idea that you think is great, that's going to solve it in Sacramento. So you start to create this solution, right? You're building this either product or this service or this, facility, and then you start taking the solution to try and figure out how, where it fits, how I can solve a problem. Well, the problem with that is you have bias. So you've built this thing, and now you're basically a hammer looking for a nail, right? So everything you see, oh, I can do that, I can do that, instead of starting with the problem. And this is the key mindset shift we want to ingrain with you, no matter what industry you're in, or for-profit, not-for-profit, doesn't matter. Love the problem, not your solution. Because right now you have a lot of assumptions built in to this idea that you think is so awesome. We need to go out and talk to the customers who you want to serve and find out their real problems. It's about their problems. It's not about your solution at this point. So really think about that as a starting point to go out and uncover those problems. And then we can design the solution exactly to meet those problems. And how do we do that? Well, we call this entrepreneurial method. we start with a business model, and basically you take the stuff in your head, you think that's a cool idea, and maybe you thought, oh, I can deliver it through these people and these partners to these customers, and I can charge this for it. So we put all that on a piece of paper, business model, and then we go through and we try and prioritize our riskiest assumptions, because everything you write down on a piece of paper is an assumption in your head. And there's a lot of risk built into assumptions, and this is why businesses fail. 9 out of 10 startups are going to fail because people just start building stuff because they think they can, and they actually don't go out and prioritize and then test, which is the next step. Does anybody care about my idea besides me? And that's what we want to do quickly to help you reduce risk, don't go bankrupt, make a social impact by going to the customer you're trying to serve. And we can do that pretty quickly. And our first step is the business model. And I mentioned this a little while ago. The definition of a business model, it's how you create, deliver, and capture value. One of the ways we can do that and visualize all the elements in this model is to use a tool. And one of these tools for social impact ventures is called a mission model canvas. It's an offshoot of a business model canvas. Maybe some of you have used that before or heard of it. And there's also the lean canvas we use, so there's a couple of variations. But for social impact ventures, the mission model was designed because it's a little bit different. You have a lot of stakeholders from that slide I showed you with the ecosystem, a lot of beneficiaries. It could be cities or counties, the government. It could be other NGOs or nonprofits you partner with. Could be some large companies that love what you're doing, and that's also their mission. They want to help you. It could be the people you're serving, right? Maybe homeless is this example. So there's a lot of things out there you have to take into consideration and make sure you're meeting their needs. When we look at this, we start with those customers, those beneficiaries and stakeholders. And then we really look at, what is this idea you have, this value proposition? For each of those beneficiaries, what is it that they're trying to get done? What's the problem that exists for them? What's their job they're trying to accomplish? What pain or gain does it solve? And then we look at, what's the impact that you hope to have happen by launching this? And for each of these beneficiary groups, there should be an impact. Right? If it's homeless, again, at the end of the day, it's how many homeless did we get off the street, right, to make their lives better? But then you have partners. Maybe you helped the food kitchen do something, or you helped a big company who also wants to give money to it, that they were able to serve their region. Maybe you held policymakers were able to use their policies to get something done. So how do you make an impact? What are those factors? Then deployment. How are you actually going to get this idea, this service, this product to the market, right? To the users, the customers, the people who need it. Through partners, scaling up maybe through public sector, through cities and federal government. Then buy-in support. How are you going to get each of these beneficiary teams to buy in? Think about this as sales, right? As customer relations, to get them as customers, to keep them, and then to grow them, right? They need, because some of these people can be saboteurs and maybe say, oh, well, that funding is, we don't like what you're doing, we're going to get the funding over here, or we have a legislation and policy that prohibits what you're trying to do. So think about how you find their needs and then get their buy-in support. On the back end here is more internal, right? What are the resources you need to do what you want to do? What are the key activities that you do? Putting something together, serving something. What are those costs? And then what are the key partners you need to actually make this a reality? These are the 9 elements of a business model. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, they're all the same. Slight tweak if you use the business model canvas and others, but for a social impact, this helps you understand how we create, deliver, and capture value. We'll stop there before I give an example. Any questions in the chat room, Cameron?
Not see any questions as of now. But just kind of as people maybe come up with questions they would like to ask, someone did ask a question around, we will be sharing a PDF version of these slides as well as sending you the recording. But are there any questions around the mission model canvas or the ecosystem or purpose statements?
Nope, not yet. Okay. All right, we'll move on to an example here. So I mentioned Shelter Box a little while ago when we did the vision statements. So I've created this as an example of what a mission model canvas could look like for Shelter Box. And I'm in Rotary, and if you look really close, you'll see a little Rotary logo here with Shelter Box. We work close with them around the world, so I know Shelter Box pretty well. So what would this look like potentially if we did this for them? And the picture says 1,000 words. So I actually put a picture here of what is this unique value prop thing. Think of the value proposition, this middle box, as the thing you're creating, the offering, the solution, the service, the product, and then a quick tagline or the description of this thing. So it's literally a box. It's a disaster relief in a box. We'll talk about what's in there. Who are the beneficiaries? Well, they're displaced families without access to shelter. Maybe there was an earthquake, or maybe it's in Ukraine. Maybe it's a disaster in like Haiti. We have things like that: earthquakes, hurricanes. We got tornadoes in the Midwest. Disaster victims, government relief organizations, and NGOs. So you can see here the ecosystem. You get different groups. Maybe these people are already trying to provide services to these victims, so they're in your ecosystem. So you need to account for them. How are we going to get this box to these people? Well, we have logistics partners, foreign aid nonprofits, and in-region distribution centers. What's the mission impact we're trying to achieve? Well, we're trying to improve psychological well-being, the family, reduce morbidity and mortality, keep them alive, improved access to education. So obviously kids are being displaced. How are we going to keep them learning, get back to school? And for the parents, livelihood sustained. How are you going to go back and actually make money for your family? We got buy-in support delivery to disaster locations. One of the things we want the people to do. So we're going to demonstrate contents to key partners and stakeholders so that they understand the value. We're going to create videos showing the box in use and being deployed. So those things will help get support from these different groups that they see the value in this. The key resources is actually the box itself, the contents, and then the storage facilities. The key activities is actually packing the shelter box. It comes with blankets, solar lights, shovels, a 6-person tent, pots and pans for cooking, hammer, all these things you need to survive at night, cook, keep warm, and it goes into a box. Activities are also fundraising and marketing. Talk about the cost things down here. And then who are some key partners? Rotary International, it helps do a lot of funding. Global logistics companies, the manufacturer, disaster relief partners who maybe are providing blankets for the lights. Other global humanitarian organizations, WHO, Red Cross, and then government officials in those countries, right? So in Ukraine, in Haiti, and things like that. So hopefully that gives you an example of, and you feel more comfortable to fill one out as you start your venture. Take what's in your head, put it on the mission model canvas. You'll probably have way too much stuff to start with. That's okay, that's really normal. So it's like, and you throw up on the page and it's like you have 50 different bullet points. No problem, get it on paper, and then you'll start to simplify it. You'll start to streamline it. And the goal is to get it to a very simple story that you can tell in just a minute or two. All right, so we've created our model that we think is going to satisfy this problem. But the key is all about, as I mentioned before, the problems and really prioritizing those. Well, how do we prioritize the problems that we want to go out and try and solve that are the biggest problems for our customers, right, our beneficiaries? Currently, everything you think of is an assumption. We need to go out and validate that those problems actually exist or that you're solving the most important ones. And the only way for you to do that is to go out into the market and understand the beneficiary's issues by talking to them and observing them. And the journey, the customer journey, is what we want to understand. You might say, oh, I just need to do this to solve this problem. Well, let's go out and validate that. And this concept of jobs to be done is what we want to kind of look at on this journey. So one of the founders of this idea of jobs to be done, Tony Olwick, comment here I love, the focus should be on what jobs customers are trying to get done. So you might not have heard that term before, what jobs someone's trying to get done. We think about problems and pains and gains. That's great. Wants or needs, all good adjectives. But if you boil it down to the job the customer's trying to get done, we all buy, technically hire, products and services to get a job done. So think about it. I got my Hydro Flask here. What job is this getting done for me? Well, it's keeping my water cold. What else? So we think about these in terms of functional, which is functional, doing that, or emotional or social. Well, why did I get it in blue? Well, because it's my favorite color. So emotionally, it makes me feel good, right? Because it's my favorite color. Hydro Flask, it's got the cool logo. Why didn't I buy a knockoff? Well, because socially, I want to be one of the cool kids, right? I got the cool logo, the coolest new toy. So what job, functionally, emotionally, socially, is your beneficiary trying to get done by buying some service, buying some product? That's what we want to overcome and find out so that you can do that in a better way. Because if they're not getting those jobs met satisfactorily, that's where your opportunity is. If everything's getting done just great, then you really don't have a place. You need to think of a new idea. So a job to be done definition is really the instantiation of an unmet need or want in response to a trigger. And we're going to talk about triggers. So when we go out and talk to our potential users, beneficiaries, we need to understand their journey. And the big thing here is what's causing them to look for some better solution, right, that you think you can provide. So here's an example of jobs to get done for listening to music, right? The job of listening to music. Some of you, like me, remember the mixtape, right? You had cassette tapes back in the 70s and 80s. And the job of that was just to be able to let you take music on the go, right? And listen to music on the go. Well, what was the job of the CD? That came along and solved the job in a better way. Well, yeah, it was more, had better clarity, quality. But the key thing was, if you remember mixtapes, you had to rewind the tape, right, to get to your favorite song or flip it over and find exactly where that song was. CDs, you could skip right to it. So one of the jobs, the functional jobs, was making it much more quick and timely to get to the song you wanted to, which also then created a job, or how do I play this, a different type of form factor, right? But that job wasn't good enough. So then along came iPods. And now you had, what job was it getting done better than a CD? Well, a CD, you could only take and play those 12 songs on a device. So if I'm mobile, that was much more difficult. Now I have many songs on one device. So I have many CDs in my pocket at any time. But that job wasn't getting done good enough. So then along comes Pandora and Spotify and all these other cloud-based songs, right? Now you have millions of songs at your disposal, and you don't even have to, in most cases, have a separate device just to play them. And now along comes things like Sonos to get a job done better quality, Amazon, you can just speak to it. So there's always a better way to get a job done. The question is there enough pain in the old way to make you switch to the new way? Do some of you still listen to CDs and mixtapes? Probably not. You're probably either doing the old school iPod or Spotify or something now. Records have come back again, but that's a different job, right? That's more of that social and emotional connection, right? It's not very functional to play a record player anymore, but it's cool now, right? Because it's the fad, right? Because you want to be trendy and cool. Definitely doesn't sound better. It's definitely less efficient, but it's getting a different job done. It's getting that old school kind of retro vibe feel. So we talked about the innovator's bias on the problem of creating a solution without really knowing what the need is. You as an entrepreneur have a chance to create the innovator's gift, which is new problems worth solving can be discovered by studying how customers use old solutions. Every product or service in the world has a problem with it. The question is that problem great enough to make somebody want to switch to something else, right? Is that pain big enough? And what we need to do is understand the customer's journey using those products or services and what triggers might have happened to cause them to look for something better. We can do that, by looking at a visual like this, a tool, a customer journey map. This one's called the customer forces model. And this really kind of helps us understand the thought process, what somebody's going through, whatever product or service they're using. And how we look at this is really about, the customer starting here and having a triggering event. They're using some old way of doing something, but then something happens and they say that's not good enough. Whether their expectations were violated because they used something and it didn't work good enough, or they had a change in circumstances. If you're single today, you get married tomorrow and have kids, that's a big change in circumstance. Now you're looking for cribs, right? You had a triggering event. Or you're just aware of something better. Someone educated you on something better. Now you're looking as a consumer, right? The user, a better outcome, right? You have motivation because something happened and caused a problem. The old way is not good enough. You're looking for a better solution. You, the new way, now have pull. You're pulling them to you, promising that your offer can satisfy the job to be done in a much better way than the old way. That's your solution. So your superpower as an entrepreneur is really anchoring against problems in the old way and saying, here's, Mr. Customer, a problem you had. Here was what triggered you. These didn't meet your needs. My solution can solve X, Y, and Z problems. Boom, there you go. That's how we want to go out and understand the customer journey, jobs to be done, so that you can satisfy those problems better. We'll stop there before we move on to the next section, because that's a big section, and see if we have any questions about the journey, jobs to be done, business mission model canvas.
What questions do you have for Brian?
Hey, Brian.
Perfect. Go for it.
Hey, Brian, this is Bryson. So nice to see you again.
Welcome.
Yeah, so I noticed a different model. It's a model that is different to the normal product of business, since these are social problems. So do you suggest that, for instance, let's talk about something related to homelessness, like you said earlier on. Would this mean you probably talk to the people who are feeling that pain or having that problem with homelessness? Because if it's a product, of course, you can identify and isolate the product users. I remember I attended one of your sessions in the Entrepreneurship Toolkit, and I know you talked extensively. Remember when we talked about the guy who was talking about the mattress? So I know that's for a product. Now this is a social problem. Do you talk to people who are going through the social problem, e.g. homeless people or people with disability? I just wanted you to clarify.
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is why, in my view, social impact ventures are much more difficult than a regular traditional for-profit business, because you have multiple beneficiaries or customers that you have to satisfy. You have to do technically one of these journey maps for each one of your beneficiaries. So let's talk homelessness. You have to literally go talk to the homelessness, right? Great, you're on the street. What are your biggest problems? Yeah, so I know you would rather have somewhere to live, but is it food? Is it water? Is it, somewhere to go to the restroom? Is it people, stealing? Is it, safety? What problems are your biggest problems? Well, then you got to go talk to the city. Okay, what are your problems, Mr. and Mrs. City official? of homelessness. What are they trying to get done that's not getting done properly? Then the other nonprofits in that space, other entities that are trying to solve homelessness, what are their problems? Because if you only focus on the users, especially in social impact, you'll run into a lot of roadblocks because of red tape, maybe legislation, grants, saboteurs. So you have to do this for each one of those.
Thank you, sir.
Great question. All right. Any others?
Can I add an element there, Brian?
Of course.
And I think when we, look at the from an impact lens to understand the totality of the issue, right? So like the unhoused population, there's multiple issues that are associated with it. And so what lane are you taking and what partners can you bring aboard to mobilize that impact? And then from a beneficiary from a benefactor standpoint, a lot of times is their problems are more of, are you making an impact, or do they get some sort of value of where they get to serve on a board, or those types of things, right? Those are things that they might be looking for that bring them into the organization or support. And then from a city officials, maybe they aren't as efficient in getting the impact done because it would have to go through the bureaucratic process. And so you're helping them achieve their goals of beautifying the city or, bringing back economic vitality, whatever those things might be. And so at the end of the day, what these tools will help you do is get the right language and understanding to articulate those needs, both to the unhoused population, to the city official, to the benefactor, so they can best understand what that does to them in order to make that change happen.
Well said. Good job. All right. Well, I'll move on. You can just stop me if there's any more questions coming up. So now we've put down our business model on paper. We've gone out and talked to potential beneficiaries, understanding their jobs to get done, their problems, all the different beneficiaries involved. So this is where we come into then reducing risk. How do we go out and test these assumptions? Well, you just did one of these and you didn't even know it, which is an experiment, or you might heard the term lean sprint or a test. They're all the same. It's basically going out, doing an experiment to validate some hypothesis. One of the ones that you just did an experiment or a test is interviewing. Interviewing is a form of an experiment. You're gathering insights and information by talking to a potential customer beneficiary. You're also observing them. So interviewing is the most common number one experiment type, and that's where we start. So what other things can we do to reduce risk and make sure that we're getting the most probability we can to make sure that this venture is successful? So here's a quote from Jeff Bezos. "I believe we are the best place in the world to fail. We have plenty of practice, and failure and invention are inseparable twins." And so this whole thing about failure and practice is all about going out and testing, making sure this idea that you think is great is really great by talking to people and doing quick experiments. They don't have to be costly or long. We just need to go out and understand them. It's better to shelve an idea before you spend $1 million building something that no one cares about. Your number one goal as an entrepreneur and an innovator is to reduce risk and uncertainty, because you're going to have stakeholders, you're going to have employees, investors who are going to give you money to help scale this idea up. They want you to reduce risk and uncertainty so that they know that what you're doing is the biggest probability for success. And the easiest way to do that is to go out and run quick experiments. Where you're in the beginning phases, you're in what we call this discovery phase. Are we in the right direction? We want to test these assumptions, quickly talk to people. And it's a spaghetti string. It's not like do this checklist, that doesn't exist. So you'll be kind of forwards and backwards and all over the place. That's really normal for an entrepreneur or a startup. And as you start to gather more and more data, you start validating each of these different areas of your business model, you'll start to get some traction. And then it becomes the risk and uncertainty is going to go down. And then it's all about execution. right? Just doing things efficient and well versus going out and validating and experimenting. What's this experiment testing, feedback kind of thing? What's it look like? Well, visualize this as like a figure eight. So there's not one right experiment. There's books and there's lots of things we can help with, but it's impossible to say for this problem you do this, but there's some guidance. And in general, you've got this decision point, you have some assumption you think this problem exists or these people are beneficiaries. Great, you've talked about it, ideated on it, you put it on your business plan, assessed it. Now you got to go out and create the hypothesis, which could be as simple as writing down, we believe these types of people are our customers in this city, as an example. Great, let's go out and experiment. Let's go talk to these people, again, homeless, in maybe just in the city of Sacramento. Maybe you're not even branching into Placer County yet. It's only county of Sacramento, or even the city limits. And you go out and do that. And then what did you learn? You write down those findings, you come back. Do we have enough data? If not, what data do we not get enough of? Do we need to talk to different types of groups? Great, let's go out and do it again. And you do this figure eight with all the different beneficiaries. And it's not just interviewing, it could be other tests. It could be things like, sitting down and saying, here's 10 problems, sort them into your top 10 priorities. And as you get moving down farther, there's different types of things. But at the end of the day, it's all about getting enough data and reducing risk that you think you can now prioritize the biggest problems and jobs to get done, because that's where the biggest impact is. And that's also where the most money is, right? You don't want to have 10 problems and you're only going to focus on number 8, 9, and 10. Yeah, maybe it helps, but you're really not moving the needle. A way for us to think about this, kind of a concept, some of you might have heard the term design thinking, but if not, it's just really a way to think about how people use things. And we think about them from 3 ways. Desirability, which means does anyone, does the customer desire this thing potentially? Feasibility, can we make it? So nowadays more technical. And viability, can we actually make money at this or create an impact? So all 3 of these things really need to be true for you to have a successful business. You might say, oh yeah, people want this and they really need this and we can make money at it. But if you can't build it, then what's the point? Or yeah, everyone really needs this and I can build this because I know how. But if you have the cost is so high, no one's going to pay you for it, then it doesn't matter. So think about these in these 3 terms. And what we can do to make it simple is we can literally overlay these 3 circles onto our business model. And that looks like this. So here's the mission model canvas. On the front side here, it's all about the customer. Their needs, we call that, desirable. Are the ideas you have desirable to your customers to meet their needs? Then we have the backside, which is all about you, the company, right? Your activities, your resources, your partners. And this is about building it, the feasibility of this product or service. And then the viability, your costs and your revenues and your impact. Can you actually do this from a monetary standpoint and make a living and be sustainable? Even though you're nonprofit, you still have to make an income, right? Make an impact. How are you going to do that? So when we think about these 3 lenses, we can then, make sure that we're testing all of these. And literally, you want to go through each of these 9 boxes and make sure that you have tested or have evidence for each one of these things, so that you're not building something with a lot of risk in it. After we do that, and now we've validated, we have a pretty good idea of that we're solving the biggest problems. One of the things that we always have to, it's a constant measurement, is what is the impact we're creating? And we really want to start with the end in mind as you're creating this business model and this idea. Because your stakeholders, your funders, your partners are all going to want to know, how are you making a difference? And prove that. Document and measure the difference you're making. because you're going to be fighting for the same maybe grant dollars, the same partners, their resources, their time. So you want to understand the impact you've made to grow and scale. So why do we measure? Well, focus the org on specific outcomes. What are the things you want to accomplish? Gather evidence to iterate your solution is another reason to measure. Make sure you're providing the best solution to solve the biggest problems. And you want evidence for funding, and it's necessary for scaling. So it was kind of a graphic from the Gates Foundation. We want to track our progress. We're going to hold ourselves accountable. We want to inform our strategies. So we test our assumptions and track our achievements by measuring the output to make sure we're on track. And we want to contribute to the field. We contribute to accomplishing shared goals, right, with our ecosystem. So this is why we measure, especially around the thing you want to impact. So what are some impact metrics that you can look at as best practices? We can look at money invested or given. We can look at how many people we've helped, how many people we've supported, what we've improved, provided, right, reached. So these are all different kind of verbs, adjectives you can use to show the impact you're making. We want to make these things simple and observable so that a reader can just, oh, that's a great impact, right? Infographics says 1,000, pictures 1,000 words. You see, 600, kids served. Okay, that's great. We only want to have about 1 to 5 different metrics. More than that, it just gets too watered down. We want it directly related to the organization's purpose and mission. So whatever that thing is you're doing, make sure if it's around literacy, great, how many books did we give? Okay, well, that's wonderful, we gave books, but how many kids read them? How many maybe tutoring hours did we give, teaching them how to read, right? All these different things to show that we're making impact. And each industry, whether it's back to those goals from United Nations or another industry standard, they're going to have, every industry has standards, and you can use some of those things too, right? Maybe it's carbon footprint, clean water, sanitation. And you want to make sure these are trackable within your organization. It's something you can actually gather, and that you regularly review these, right? Every month, every quarter. So let's look at some examples. Here, what to measure. And then we'll do a good example. Start with your purpose statement and focus on outcomes and impact. So you want to help homelessness. Make sure it's observable, specific, and measurable changes that quantify an actual impact on someone's life. So inputs, how many resources you've invested. Outputs, the immediate results of those activities. Then outcomes, the changes in conditions of stakeholders. And then the biggest one is impact, long-term changes in human well-being and the environment. So we don't just want to say we gave 1,000 books. Okay, that's great. Well, what was the output of that for the school, the kids? What was the outcomes and what was the long-term impact that had? Maybe, it was jobs were created down the road. Maybe it's a 20-year study, right? Versus, yeah, it's great, we gave a bunch of books. So we want to know how that helps the long-term impact. Oops, and here we go. One of the pitfalls that people get into is using wrong metrics. So we want to get as close to impact as possible. So an example would be, we spent $100 on purchasing 100 mosquito nets. That's awesome. Great, you gave those away. Well, what was the output of that? You distributed 98 mosquito nets to families in need, right? So you spent $100, bought, excuse me, bought 100 nets. Too much talking. But you only distributed 98. All right, that's still pretty good. What about outcomes? 75% of the families installed and used the nets correctly, resulting in a 50% drop in malaria cases. So the outcome is much more, say, impactful than the inputs and outputs, but that's still not the end game, the impact. Regionally, childhood mortality rates due to malaria halved over 5 years. So that's a big deal. You save the lives of many, many kids by buying and sending nets, training them how to do it correctly, and tracking that. This is what people want to see, not just that you spent and bought 100 nets. So we talked about scale at the beginning, that really you as an entrepreneur, especially to make a social impact, you have to scale this vision. You can't just launch a social venture, again, to help just a couple of people to not be homeless. That's really more of a hobby and service project for a service organization like Rotary, which is great, but you need to scale that, right? So homeless in Sacramento, how do you make a difference? And to do that, you really have to scale up and you have to get funding to scale. And it's hard for you as an entrepreneur to do it yourselves, which is why the ecosystem is so important. So this area up here of diffusion and scaling is where really people start to look for funding. Maybe you're bootstrapping it down here, which means your own savings, friends and family, maybe you got a partner. But then once you get it ready to scale out, after you've got a couple of prototypes in the market, your MVP, this is where funding comes into play. Grants, city, federal government, other partners, big companies who want to go after that cause just like you. And here are some examples of funding models that you can look into. So for grant support, right, your traditional nonprofits get a lot of grants, and they write a grant, continuously looking for new funding sources from the government. And nonprofits with an income generating model. So maybe you're a nonprofit, but you still generating money. Maybe you get grants, maybe you get loans, maybe you also get donations. You could be a for-profit social venture, right? You can still make money to create social good. Think about Bombas, socks, right? They still make a lot of money, but they give things away. They give the socks away. They're making a social impact. So it's not just nonprofit. So you might get a loan guarantee, an equity loan, again, cash donations. A socially responsible business. It's a for-profit business focused on both maximizing profits for shareholders and giving back to the wider community. So there's a new thing called a benefit corporation, and that's part of their mandate. So you could, again, donations, private equity loans, venture capitals, loans from banks, and then traditional for-profits, which is really where you're issuing stock, you're getting debt from banks, maybe it's an IPO. So these are different ways for you to get funded, depending on what area you fall into, how big you scale. But most of you are going to start with really bootstrapping friends and family money, and maybe easiest way to do it would be either a grant or a grant donation from a maybe a local company who likes what you're doing and wants to help you out to you can get to market. So bringing it all together, kind of looking at maybe a story and how it could play out in the real world here. So Feeding America, real company, we looked at their vision and purpose statement earlier. Their vision is an America where no one goes hungry, remember that. And their mission, different than the vision, is to feed America's hungry through a nationwide network of member food banks and engage our country in the fight to end hunger. So they're kind of giving it more detail, right? Nationwide network of food banks versus just the big vision, right? No one's hungry. Our commitment is to keep people at the center of all we do and address racial disparities in all our work. So a little bit about values, equality, people-centered, right? Committed. So then they go into what are our measurements? You helped us feed nearly 5.2 billion people this year, over 2 billion pounds of food received. So that was like the inputs, right? Okay, that's great. You helped us nourish over 50% of network members, 72% of food distributed by the network classified as promoting good health. Okay. You helped us empower network members, helped people submit 317,000 applications, nearly 50% of network members engaged in ending hunger practice. You helped us unite. Over 1.2 million people were reached through Feeding America's social media, and over 200,000 news stories featured in America Network. And you helped us connect, awarded $240 million in grants to food banks and advanced innovative approaches, as they mentioned here. So there's a lot of things that they did. But at the end of the day, you can summarize that up to the meaningful impact. We had over 1.8 billion pounds of fresh produce distributed to families by network members. That's huge. Over 573 million meals given, 4 billion pounds of groceries rescued from waste. And then you have lesser things here, 13 million visits to the website, 57% of food banks use their meal feature. So you can see the big ones here are the biggest and boldest, and that's the big impact you're making. So we're going to stop there and really wrap it up with some questions and then talk about some programs we have coming up next. So I'm hoping there's some questions out there.
What questions do you have for Brian and or myself?
It was either really, really well done and simple, or I threw so much at you that your brain's going to explode and you're glossy-eyed.
Well, maybe I can, do you want me to buy some time with some links or?
You bet.
Cool. So I'll buy some time here while you gather your questions and digest all that great content. I did throw some links into the chat here. Brian mentioned a 4-part series that we are going to be running, so you can sign up to learn more about our social innovation series. So it's a 4-part series where we take all of these frameworks and tools and dive in much deeper as we go forward. So that is $236 for 4 weeks and is a great session. Tonight we have Startup Happy Hour with Arik Levy, who is a successful entrepreneur in the Sacramento region. And then we also have the Lean Innovator application that is set to be open through March or end of May. And then we also have a workshop called The Working Genius, and that'll be in April. So check out those links and sign up. So hopefully we bought some time for some questions.
Yeah, good stuff. I don't see any other questions. You kind of already hit where I was going to go next, Cameron, which is the wrap up about the 4-part series. And we're happy to connect you to other potential stakeholders if you're already down the path with your idea, or if you just want to chat about something, you can drop me an email here and we can talk with some our open office hours, make a appointment to help you out. Any other comments anyone has? So if you don't have a question, that's fine. I would love to see whether you want to unmute or put it in the chat. What was the biggest takeaway that you had, or kind of insight moment, aha moment today? That would be very helpful.
Hey, Brian, this is Chryson again.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. This for me, it's a huge paradigm shift, and it's a very, very fantastic model. The reason being that I'm a social worker, I teach social work, and of course, seeing this gives me a lot of food for thought, because this is a totally different model to solving social problems. And like Cameron also emphasized, when he brought in how, you could work with other stakeholders to actually get social problems solved. I think one of the greatest problems we've had as social workers has always been, a lack of funds and not being able to scale up. I remember when you talked about that chasm. That chasm is where most social problems basically drop when you work from a social work model. So for me, it is almost like you bring in social work and business and basically, mixing it up to have social innovation. So one other question I want to ask is this: when you mentioned some corporations that basically are heavily invested in social innovation, does that mean out of those 17 social development goals you mentioned, does that mean a company like, say, Microsoft or a company like, say, Google would pick one or two to focus on? Because this is a lot of work. So I can't just imagine a corporation doing 5 or 6 or 7 of them. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, good question. So, yeah, usually big companies will have a couple of areas that are of passion to them, either the founders or the employees. And many large companies, Fortune 500, they'll ask their employees, what most do you care about? And they'll have maybe 3 or 4 areas of giving. And it could be, again, clean water, equality, rights, it could be literacy. And you just have to go to their websites and see, under social responsibility usually, or news, or about us, what is it that they're passionate about, trying to, where do they give money and donate to? People like the Microsoft or Gates Foundation, they might have many, but usually you'll have a company that, Dale Carlson, who founded the Carlson Center, Sleep Train Mattress Centers, they do a lot with foster kids. So foster children, the youth were his passion. So you might go to someone's website and say, oh, I didn't know you cared about, human trafficking, which, I do a lot with in the Family Justice Centers. So you just need to do that research, do the Google search, who might be passionate about your cause, and then be able to go talk to them.
Thank you, sir. And then one last question to Cameron. Would the series you're talking about, you just posted, the social innovation series, would there be, at the end of the 4 weeks, did you say, what does it cost? And at the end of the 4 weeks, what do you get out of it?
Yeah, so it's $236 for 4 weeks, and they're 4 1.5-hour sessions. And we bring in not only Brian, but one of our other entrepreneurs in residence will help facilitate that program. And then we bring in guest speakers from the broader community and different stakeholders to kind of look at that social innovation landscape from those different lenses. And so, tangibly, if you came in with an idea, we'd hope to help you further flesh out the, overall ecosystem of that idea and how you can, take tangible steps to creating your social venture. If you're, already in an existing non-for-profit or organization, is how do you bring that impact idea to fruition? So actually bringing it to market. So that's both understanding how you can maybe build a prototype and how you can get some of that funded, and who would be those funding partners. So are you going to more donation based? Are you going to partner with counties that will help fund you? Right, that's all the business model tied to those elements. So that would be kind of what we hope to get you to figure out, all those different elements.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. And then one other thing I wanted to share, just I think sometimes when we think of for-profit businesses, having a social venture component to it, sometimes that can lead to detrimental things. So the ones that come to mind are like Tom's Shoes, where they were donating every pair of shoes that you bought, they donated a pair of shoe to somewhere in Argentina. And the challenge there was they totally destroyed the economy of the cobblers who were building the shoes there, right? And so that's again where you have to understand the impact you're trying to have, who are the partners that are going to facilitate that, and try to actually create the change. And that's where understanding what the purpose is drives that, because in the long run that has been detrimental to a degree to Tom's, because it was like, oh, this actually isn't having the impact that I thought it was going to have, right? And so those are elements that we can continue to connect with, but I love some of those other examples.
Yeah, thank you. Real quick, we would love your help in the chat. If you could just put, for our partners, we're trying to give feedback on the impact and was this valuable, and you could just put a number between 1, 2, and 3. 1 being, yeah, it was okay. 2, yeah, it was of some value, or 3, it was great and I learned a lot. It was valuable time, and now I I feel better about a social venture I might do. If you could just put that in there, that will at least help us kind of gauge to our partners who might want to sponsor some things, that the content's great, people are learning, they're understanding more about how to be a social entrepreneur. Appreciate the feedback.
Share one additional link as well. Brian mentioned that we offer office hours. So if any of you are, wanting to explore the social innovation series and any of our other programming, you can use that link and line up time with myself, Brian, or one of our other entrepreneurs in residence, Jesse. So that would be great.
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. Cameron, over to you for any last words.
Awesome. Well, want to say thank you, Brian, for leading the charge on this, and then for all of you for being in the space, and looking forward to bringing your social innovation to light. So if you have any questions on the social innovation series or any other programming that we offer, would love for you to connect with us and engage us further. So these programs are virtual. So as you can see, you're joining us from anywhere, from Brazil to Alabama. So we're excited to have you in the space and look forward to working with you as you go further. So you have a great rest of the day and look forward to speaking with you all sometime soon.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.